Coming up, the ASEAN Regional Forum is set to officially kick off this afternoon in the Laotian capital. The deployment of THAAD on South Korean soil is expected to top the agenda among diplomats from 27 different countries, including North Korea. The Korean economy expands in the 0% range for 3 straight quarters at the end of June, further fueling concerns about the country falling into a low-growth rut. The Democratic National Convention opens in Philadelphia, but the fallout from the party's email leak continues, with supporters of Senator Bernie Sanders taking a hard turn against Hillary Clinton's campaign. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Tuesday, July 26th. Here in Seoul, you're tuned into our midday newscast. Thanks for joining us. I'm Hwang Ji-hye. The ASEAN Regional Forum, the main event among a number of ASEAN sideline meetings which are underway in the Laotian capital, Vientiane, is set to kick off later this Tuesday local time. South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se will take part in the 27-member meeting that includes ASEAN members as well as countries from the halted six-party denuclearization talks, including North Korea. Seoul's top diplomat is expected to send a strong message opposing North Korea's continuous nuclear and missile development, while his North Korean counterpart Lee Yong-ho is likely to defend Pyongyang's actions. A joint statement is to be issued by the host country Laos after the meeting, which could take up to a few days or a week, according to officials, as it's difficult to include all the opinions of attending nations. It remains to be seen how strongly South Korea's statement on the North will be reflected, as Laos and North Korea enjoy close ties. The South China Sea and THAAD deployment are other topics expected to be discussed during the forum. And a series of high-profile regional meetings have been held on the forum's margins. South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se has worked various diplomatic channels to reaffirm ties with the U.S. while keeping relations with China steady. Kwon So-ah follows this report from Laos.
While South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se and his North Korean counterpart had a short encounter during which they reportedly said they were glad to see each other, it was a different story for North Korea and China. Pyongyang and Beijing's foreign ministers held their first bilateral talks in 2 years on the sidelines of the ASEAN Regional Forum, the only security forum that the North Korean delegation regularly attends. The beginning of their meeting was open to the media in what's being seen as a rare gesture. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi congratulated his North Korean counterpart Lee Yong-ho for taking the foreign minister post. According to a North Korea official, the meeting took place as part of normalizing communication between the longtime allies. Pundits say South Korea-China relations could go downhill, while North Korea-China relations move up. China has been adamantly opposed to the deployment of the missile defense system THAAD to South Korea, a stance shared by North Korea and Russia as well. Meanwhile, Minister Yoon reaffirmed his ties with the U.S., especially when it comes to North Korea issues.
So I believe this is the right time for us to send out a very clear and strong message to North Korea that our alliance is stronger, deeper, and broader than ever.
I'm very grateful to our friends in Korea for their very significant contribution to so many different global issues at this point.
Seoul's chief diplomat Yoon and his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida agreed that South Korea-Japan relations have improved in recent days since the landmark deal on Japan's wartime sexual slavery issue last December. With these developments, there are concerns that a South Korea-US-Japan versus North Korea-China-Russia diplomatic structure is forming. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News, Vientiane.
The Korean economy got a slight bump in the second quarter on the back of government measures to boost spending, but that has far from wiped clean lingering concerns about the country falling into a low-growth trap as the pace of expansion still remains below 1%. Kim Min-ji reports.
Korea's GDP in the second quarter now shows the country has been stuck in 0% range growth for the third straight quarter, adding to concerns about the strength of the economy. But there are some moderate signs of improvement. In its estimates, the Bank of Korea says the country's GDP expanded 0.7% in the April to June period from the previous quarter. This marks a slight pickup from the 0.5% expansion posted in the first 3 months of the year.
Domestic consumption contributed to the GDP largely compared to the previous quarter. Private spending and construction investment contributed by 0.4%, while facilities investment also turned positive.
Construction of facilities investment in fact led the growth, rising 2.9% respectively. Private consumption and exports also returned to positive territory, both rising 0.9% from the previous quarter. But with growth figures still feeble and uncertainty such as the possible fallout from Brexit, as well as the government's ongoing corporate restructuring drive abound, the Bank of Korea recently cut its growth outlook to 2.7% for this year, down 0.1 percentage point than its earlier forecast in April. This comes despite the central bank slashing its key rate to a record low of 1.25% in June, and the government's aggressive stimulus package, which includes a supplementary budget worth some $9.7 billion. Some analysts have been skeptical about the effects these stimulus measures will have in propping up the growth rate. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, the government's bill for Korea's supplementary budget worth nearly $9.7 billion has been submitted to the National Assembly this morning. Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-won will read an administrative policy speech in place of the president on Wednesday, explaining the details of the extra budget. Fierce debates between the ruling and opposition parties are expected that day, as the budget bill excludes funds needed to cover free childcare for children between the ages 3 and 5, a policy long sought by the Liberals. The government and the ruling Saenuri Party say the extra budget is mainly focused on cushioning the impact of corporate restructuring, especially for the nation's ailing shipbuilding industry, and boosting job creation. Given this, many believe the bill will not pass by the government's desired date of August 12th, when a plenary session is likely to be held. Over in the U.S., the Democratic Party's National Convention is underway in Philadelphia. Things got off to a rough start amid an email leak controversy that threatened to torpedo the party's message of unity, as a star-studded lineup of speakers was brought out to pull things back together. Hwang Ho-jun reports.
I hereby call the 47th Quadrennial Democratic National Convention to order.
The Democratic Party kicked off its 4-day national convention on Monday with a star-studded lineup of guest speakers that included Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, and First Lady Michelle Obama. The theme of the evening was United Together.
Got to elect Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine.
But things got off to a rough start amid the fallout from a recent email leak that added a touch of irony to the proceedings. The party has been embroiled in a controversy ever since the release on Friday of 20,000 emails appearing to show party officials working to sabotage the Sanders campaign in favor of Clinton. The FBI has since opened an investigation into the matter, and a recent poll suggests that the ongoing scandal may have dented Clinton's poll numbers. A CNN ORC poll released Monday gave Trump a 3-point lead over Clinton at 48 to 45%. Disappointed Sanders supporters disrupted the early part of the convention, repeatedly booing at Clinton's name. There were also speakers who said that continuing to oppose Clinton was hurting the party.
I love Bernie just as much as the next person, but this is our country, for Christ's sake. Not voting for Hillary is a sure win for Donald Trump.
Ahead of the convention, the party laid out its platform. The document stands in stark contrast to the Republican platform, especially on domestic policy, but there are some similarities when it comes to foreign policy. While vowing to deepen America's relationships in the Pacific, including with South Korea, the party calls North Korea, quote, the most repressive regime on the planet, run by a sadistic dictator. The document also says the country must review its past trade agreements with other nations. The party is scheduled to formally nominate former Secretary of State Clinton as its candidate for the White House on Tuesday, and she will deliver an acceptance speech on Thursday. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
In Japan, at least 19 people are feared dead after an attack at a facility for the disabled by a man wielding a knife. The incident, which also left at least 45 people injured with 20 in critical condition, is one of the worst mass killings in the country's post-war history. Lee Min-young has the story.
A gruesome knife attack in Japan has left dozens of people dead or seriously injured. Japan's NHK says a young man brandishing a knife broke into a facility for the disabled in Sagamiera, Kanagawa Prefecture, just outside of Tokyo, on Tuesday at around 2:30 a.m. Satoshi Uematsu, a 26-year-old former employee of the facility, later turned himself in to the police. He has since been arrested and charged with murder. Japanese media reports that during the incident, the man screamed that he wanted to rid the world of the disabled. The police are investigating possible motives for the crime. The facility is home to 149 residents with mental disabilities, and Japan's Kyodo news agency said about a third of them are over 60. The incident is one of the worst mass killings in Japan, which has one of the world's lowest crime rates in decades. Lee Min-young, Arirang News.
The Syrian asylum seeker who blew himself up outside a bar in the German town of Ansbach is now known to have pledged allegiance to the leader of the Islamic State. The incident is the latest in a series of attacks to hit the country in about a week's time, fueling growing anxiety about the specter of terrorism and the country's immigration policies. Kim Mo-gyun has more.
Bavarian Interior Minister Joachim Herrmann said on Monday that security officials found a video on the attacker's mobile phone that captured his pledge of allegiance to the leader of the Islamic State militant group. It also showed the 27-year-old threatening a revenge attack on Germans.
On the mobile phone, there is a corresponding video of the perpetrator issuing an attack threat in Arabic. According to this, he expressly announces, in the name of Allah, and testifying his allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, a famous Islamist leader, an act of revenge against the Germans because they are standing in the way of Islam, and as retribution for the killing of Muslims.
Other Islamic video contents were also discovered on storage devices at the 27-year-old attacker's home, along with various materials that could be used to make a bomb. The minister said that an investigation into the content of the videos is still ongoing, but based on the evidence so far, the attack is likely an act of terror inspired by extremist Islamic beliefs. The so-called Islamic State group has claimed responsibility for the attack through its Ansbach news agency, but confirmation of the link is pending. Germany is reeling from 4 deadly attacks that have hit the country since July 18th, leaving 10 people dead and more than 30 wounded. Most recently on Sunday, a Syrian refugee set off a bomb near a music festival in the southern town of Ansbach, killing himself and injuring a dozen others. Earlier on the same day, another Syrian refugee attacked several people in southwestern Germany, killing 1 person and injuring 2 others. Police presence had been beefed up in light of recent events, particularly in public areas like airports and train stations. The string of attacks has fueled growing public concern about the country's already controversial open-door refugee policy. More than 1 million migrants have entered Germany over the past year, many fleeing from war in Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
Turkey is gearing up to draft a new constitution which could see the reintroduction of the death penalty abolished in 2004. Turkish Prime Minister Binali Yildirim announced on Monday that the ruling and opposition parties will work together on the revisions. In an interview the same day with German broadcaster ARD, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan spoke again about the possibility of reinstituting capital punishment, saying that the Turkish people want the death penalty back. Meanwhile, amid an ongoing crackdown that sparked fears about Erdogan's growing power, the Turkish government has ordered the detention of 42 journalists, adding to the thousands detained since a failed July 15th coup. So far, the authorities have rounded up about 60,000 soldiers, police, judges, and civil servants. Back here in Korea, credit and debit card spending shot up in the second quarter this year from last year when the country was reeling from the MERS outbreak. The Credit Finance Association says the amount put on plastic rose nearly 14% to roughly $156 billion. The pace of growth is around 3.5 percentage points higher than that posted in the second quarter last year. The rise is attributed to the low base effect seen in the April to June period last year due to the viral outbreak that dampened domestic consumption. Card spending and the tourism industry in particular saw some noticeable rebounds, with consumption in accommodation-related industries rising over 10%. While German automaker Volkswagen's emissions scandal is still ongoing, Korea's imports of German cars have seen a decline for the first time in 13 years. According to Korea Automobile Manufacturers Association, Korea's imports of German vehicles during the first 5 months of this year fell below 52,000 units, dropping more than 12% on year. Inbound shipments from the European nation had increased every year since 2003, posting double-digit growth in recent years and notably recording a near 34% jump and 26% increase in 2014 and 2015. In terms of sales, Volkswagen Korea's dropped the most by more than 33% and Audi's by over 10% in the first half of the year. BMW's sales slid 4%. While Mercedes-Benz saw a boost of 6.8% during the same period. We're in for another hot and humid day here in Korea with a heat wave advisory in effect for most of the country through Wednesday. Today, the afternoon high in Seoul is expected to top out at 32 degrees Celsius, and Daegu, which is under a heat wave warning, will be even hotter with the mercury soaring up to 35 degrees. But relief is on the way. There's rain in the forecast for the central region starting early Wednesday morning, which is expected to pull temperatures down a bit. The southern provinces, including Gyeongsang-do, will remain hot with a few occasional showers to break the heat. And that's all we have for now. Thanks for watching. I'm Hwang Jae. We will be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Goodbye for now.